It was a bright, sunny afternoon in the little neighborhood of Maple Grove. The sky was blue, with fluffy white clouds floating by. Birds chirped happily in the trees, their songs filling the air. Kids ran around in the yards, laughing and playing tag. It was the kind of day that made you feel good just to be outside. And there on his front porch sat Jake Miller. He was a quiet guy with a friendly smile, holding a cold glass of lemonade in his hand. The ice clinked against the glass as he took a sip, enjoying the sweet, tangy taste. In his yard, a soft sound floated through the air. It came from his wind chimes. They weren't anything fancy, just a few shiny metal tubes tied together with string hanging from a hook on his porch. When the breeze blew, the tubes bumped into each other, making a gentle, tinkling noise. It sounded like little bells ringing, soft and calm. To Jake, it was the perfect sound. It made his yard feel cozy, like a happy little corner of the world. As he'd put them up when he moved in a few months ago, and every time he heard them, he felt at home. But not everyone liked that sound. Oh no, to one person in Maple Grove, those wind chimes weren't peaceful at all. To her, they were trouble, big trouble. That person was Karen Phillips. She lived across the street from Jake, and she wasn't just any neighbor. She was the boss of the Homeowners Association, or the HOA. That's a group of people who make rules for the neighborhood, like what color you can paint your house or how tall your grass can grow. Karen loved being in charge. Jake had a nickname for her in his head, the Queen of Complaints. And boy, did she live up to that name. Karen was the kind of lady who always had something to say. If your dog barked too loud, she'd write it down. If your mailbox was a little crooked, she'd knock on your door. She carried a clipboard everywhere she went, like it was glued to her hands. That clipboard was her weapon. She'd scribble notes on it about anything she didn't like, and she didn't like much. Karen walked around the neighborhood with her nose in the air, acting like she owned every house, every tree, every blade of grass. To her, Maple Grove was her kingdom, and she was the ruler. Jake, though, he was the opposite. He was new to the neighborhood and he kept to himself. He wasn't loud or flashy. He didn't throw big parties or cause any fuss. He just liked sitting on his porch, sipping his lemonade and listening to his wind chimes. His house was small but neat, with a green lawn and a few flowers by the steps. He waved at people when they passed by, and he always said hello with a smile. Everyone thought he was just a regular guy, someone who didn't want any trouble. The neighbors liked him because he was nice and didn't bother anyone. Kids would ride their bikes past his house and he'd wave. Old ladies walking their dogs would nod at him and he'd nod back. Jake seemed simple, easygoing, normal. But here's the thing, Jake wasn't as simple as he looked. Nope, he had a secret, a big juicy secret that nobody in Maple Grove knew about, not the kids, not the old ladies, not even nosy Karen Phillips. He kept it hidden, tucked away like a treasure chest buried in the sand. And that secret, it was something so surprising, so wild, that it could turn everything upside down. Jake wasn't just sipping lemonade and chilling out all day. Oh no, there was more to him than met the eye. A lot more. Now Karen didn't know about Jake's secret. Not yet, but she was about to find out, and not in a way she'd like. See, Karen had been watching Jake's wind chimes for a while. Every day she'd stand on her perfect porch with its perfect flowers and perfect white chairs, and she'd glare across the street. Her house was spotless. Her grass was cut just right. Everything about her place screamed, "I'm the best." But those wind chimes, they drove her crazy. To her, that tinkling sound wasn't pretty or peaceful. It was annoying, it was wrong, it was against the rules, or at least she thought it should be. She'd mutter to herself, "Those noisy things don't belong here." She'd frown and tap her pencil on her clipboard, thinking up ways to get rid of them. To Karen, Jake's wind chimes were like a slap in the face. How dare he hang something up without asking her? How dare he make noise in her perfect little kingdom? She couldn't stand it, and the more she heard them, the madder she got. It was like the chimes were teasing her, ringing just to make her grumpy. Day after day, that soft tinkle pushed her closer to the edge. Jake didn't know it yet, but he'd started a war. A quiet war, sure, but a war all the same. Karen saw those wind chimes as a challenge. To her, they weren't just metal tubes, they were a sign that Jake didn't respect her power. And Karen, she didn't like anyone stepping out of line. She'd spent years making sure everyone in Maple Grove followed her rules. She'd bossed people around, told them what to do, and made sure her neighborhood stayed exactly how she wanted it. But Jake, he was new. He didn't bow down to her, he didn't even seem to care, and that made Karen's blood boil. So there they were, Jake, the quiet guy with his lemonade and his wind chimes, and Karen, the queen of complaints with her clipboard and her temper. Two neighbors living across the street from each other, about to crash into a big, crazy mess. Jake didn't want trouble, he really didn't. He just wanted to relax and enjoy his new home. But Karen, she was looking for a fight. She didn't know who Jake really was, and she didn't care. All she saw was a guy with wind chimes she hated, and she was ready to do something about it. What do you think was going to happen next? Can you imagine Karen stomping over to Jake's house ready to yell? Or maybe Jake just sitting there cool as a cucumber while she freaked out. And that secret of his, what could it be? Was he a superhero, a spy, something even wilder? One thing's for sure, this story about to get good, really good. Because Karen was about to stumble right into something she never saw coming, and Jake, well, he was ready to surprise her and everyone else in Maple Grove. Let's picture it. The sun was still shining, the birds were still singing, and the kids were still playing. It was a perfect day in a perfect little neighborhood. Jake leaned back in his chair, the lemonade sweating in his hand. The wind chimes jingled softly like they were saying, "Everything's fine." Across the street, Karen stood on her porch, her eyes narrow and her lips tight. She gripped her clipboard so hard her knuckles turned white. She was planning something. You could see it in her face. She wasn't going to let those wind chimes stay up, not if she had anything to say about it. Jake didn't seem worried, though. He just watched the world go by, calm and quiet. Maybe he knew something Karen didn't. Maybe he was waiting for the right moment. That secret of his, it was like a bomb ticking under the surface, ready to blow up everything Karen thought she knew. She thought she was the boss. She thought she could scare Jake into doing what she wanted. But oh, was she wrong, so very wrong. The neighborhood kept buzzing along. A dog barked down the street. A kid zoomed by on a scooter, the wheels humming on the pavement. The wind blew again and the chimes sang their little song. To Jake, it was music. To Karen, it was war drums. Two people, two houses, two totally different worlds, and they were about to smash together in the wildest way. So what do you think Jake's hiding? Why do you think he's so calm while Karen's losing her mind? Stick around, because this story's just getting started. It's going to twist and turn and take you places you never expected. Corinne's about to make her move and Jake's secret. It's going to change everything. Get ready, this is going to be a ride you won't forget. Corinne Phillips had been watching Jake's wind chimes for weeks. Every single day, she'd stand on her porch, her arms crossed tight, staring across the street at his house. Her lawn was perfect, green and neat, not a weed in sight. She'd mow it herself, making sure every blade of grass was just the right height. To her, everything had to be perfect, but those wind chimes, oh, they were not perfect, not at all. Too noisy, she'd grumble under her breath, her eyes squinting like she was trying to zap them away with her mind. The soft, tinkling sound floated over to her house whenever the wind blew, and it made her mad, really mad. She'd sit there sipping her tea, trying to enjoy her day, but those chimes kept ringing. Tinkle, tinkle, tinkle. To Jake, it was a happy little sound, like bells saying hello. But to Corinne, it was like nails scratching on a chalkboard. She'd mutter to herself, "Those things don't belong here. They're too loud, they're ruining everything." She'd tap her fingers on her clipboard, the one she always carried. That clipboard was her best friend. It had all the rules of the neighborhood written down, rules she made sure everyone followed. And in her head, those wind chimes were breaking every single one. For weeks, she watched and waited. She'd peek out her window, her curtains pulled just a little to the side, spying on Jake's house. She saw him sitting on his porch, drinking his lemonade, looking all calm and happy. That made her even madder. How could he just sit there, acting like nothing was wrong? Didn't he know those chimes were driving her crazy? Didn't he care? Corinne didn't think so. To her, Jake was being rude. He was new and he didn't follow her rules. That was a big no-no in her book. One day, Corinne decided she couldn't take it anymore. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, and those chimes were tinkling louder than ever, or at least, that's how it felt to her. She'd been cutting her roses, snipping the stems with her little scissors when the wind picked up. The chimes started going crazy, tinkle, tinkle, tinkle. She dropped her scissors right into the dirt and clenched her fists. "That's it," she said out loud, even though no one was around to hear her. "I've had enough of this nonsense." She marched inside her house, her flip-flops flapping on the floor. She grabbed her HOA handbook off the kitchen table. It was a big book, full of pages and pages of rules she'd written herself. She flipped through it, her fingers moving fast, looking for something, anything she could use against Jake. "No loud noises," she read, stabbing the page with her finger. "That's it, those chimes are loud. They're against the rules." She slammed the book shut, a big grin spreading across her face. She had him now. She was sure of it. Corinne didn't waste another second. She put on her flip-flops, bright pink ones that matched her shirt, and stormed out the door. Her feet smacked the pavement as she crossed the street, her clipboard in one hand and her handbook in the other. She didn't care that the neighbors might see her. She didn't care that the kids playing nearby stopped to stare. She was on a mission. Jake's wind chimes were going down, and she was going to make sure of it. When she got to Jake's house, she didn't even slow down. She climbed the steps to his porch, thump, 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 and banged on his door with her fist. Bam, bam, bam. She hit it so hard the whole porch shook a little. Jake was inside, sitting on his couch, reading a book. He heard the banging and looked up, surprised. "Who's that?" he wondered. He set his book down and walked to the door, still calm as ever. When he opened it, there was Corinne, standing there like a tornado ready to blow everything away. "Those chimes are against the rules," she barked, her voice loud and sharp. She waved her HOA handbook in front of his face, holding it up like it was a sword. "They're too noisy. You need to take them down right now or I'm calling the cops." Now Jake just stood there looking at her. He didn't yell back, he didn't frown, he smiled. A little easy smile, like he wasn't scared at all. "They're not hurting anyone, Karen," he said, his voice nice and steady. "It's just a little music in the wind, that's all." "Music?" Karen screeched, her eyes going wide. She took a step closer, pointing her finger right at him. "It's not music, it's a racket, a big awful noise. You're ruining this neighborhood with those stupid things." Her face was turning red now, and she was shaking her handbook like it might jump out of her hands and attack him. "I'm the boss of the HOA, and I say they have to go. Take them down, or you'll be sorry." Jake tilted his head a little, still smiling. He didn't say anything for a second, just watched her yell. The wind chimes tinkled behind him, soft and sweet, like they were laughing at her. That made Karen even angrier. She spun around, her flip-flops squeaking on the porch, and marched off down the steps. "Fine," she shouted over her shoulder. "You asked for it. I'm calling the cops right now." She pulled her phone out of her pocket and started dialing as she stomped back across the street. Jake shook his head, still calm. He watched her go, her pink flip-flops flapping all the way to her house. Then he turned around and went back inside, closing the door behind him. He wasn't worried, not yet. See, Karen thought she had all the power. She thought she could scare him, boss him around, make him do what she wanted. But she didn't know something important. She didn't know who she was messing with, and that was her first big mistake. Inside his house, Jake sat back down on his couch. He picked up his book and started reading again like nothing had happened. Outside, the wind chimes kept tinkling, happy and free. Across the street, Karen was yelling into her phone, packing back and forth on her perfect lawn. "Yes, hello," she said, her voice loud enough for the whole neighborhood to hear. "I need the police. There's a man breaking the rules and he won't stop. It's an emergency." The kids on their bikes stopped riding and stared. An old lady walking her dog paused to listen. Everyone was watching now, wondering what was going on. Karen didn't care. She kept talking, waving her arms, telling the person on the phone all about Jake and his noisy wind chimes. She thought she was winning, she thought she was in charge, but oh, she had no idea what was coming. Jake, though, he just kept reading his book. He didn't run outside to argue. He didn't take the chimes down. He didn't even peek out the window to see what Karen was doing. He was cool as a cucumber, like he knew something she didn't. And he did. That secret of his, it was still hidden, still waiting. Karen was marching right into trouble, and she didn't even know it yet. What would you do if someone got mad at you over something so silly? Would you fight back? Would you laugh? Jake didn't do either. He just waited, and that made everything even more exciting. Because Karen was loud and bossy, but Jake was quiet and strong. She thought she could push him around, but she was wrong, so wrong. The tension was building, like a storm getting ready to break. Karen was furious, stomping around, ready to fight. Jake was calm, sitting still, keeping his cool. The neighborhood watched, holding its breath. Something big was about to happen. You could feel it in the air. Those wind chimes kept ringing, soft and steady, like they were counting down to the moment everything would change. So what do you think? Was Karen going to get her way, or was Jake's secret going to turn the tables? Let's see how this plays out, because it's only going to get wilder from here. The next day rolled around, bright and sunny, just like before. The birds were chirping again and the kids were back outside, riding bikes and kicking balls. But something was different in Maple Grove. Something exciting was brewing. Karen Phillips wasn't about to let Jake's wind chimes stay up, not after their big showdown yesterday. She promised to call the cops, and Karen always kept her promises, especially when she was mad. Sure enough, right after lunch, a police car pulled up to Jake's house. Its red and blue lights flashed, spinning around like a little light show. The neighbors couldn't help but notice. Curtains moved and faces peeked out from windows all up and down the street. "What's going on?" they whispered to each other. "Why are the police here?" Little kids stopped playing and pointed, their eyes wide. Everyone was curious and the air felt buzzy with excitement. Karen stood on her porch across the street, watching it all happen. Her arms were crossed tight over her chest and she had a big smirk on her face. That smirk said, "I won. I told him I'd do it, and I did." She called the police just like she said she would, and now they were here. To her, this was a prize, a shiny trophy for being the boss of the neighborhood. She rocked back and forth on her flip-flops, waiting to see Jake get in trouble. Oh, she couldn't wait. The police car stopped right in front of Jake's house. Two officers climbed out, their shiny badges catching the sunlight. They looked serious, but not too serious, like they'd rather be somewhere else. They walked up the steps to Jake's porch, thump, 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 and knocked on his door. Knock, knock, not too loud, just enough to get his attention. Inside, Jake was eating a sandwich, peanut butter and jelly, his favorite. He heard the knock and put his sandwich down on a plate. "Huh," he said to himself. "I wonder who that is." He wiped his hands on a napkin and got up, still calm as ever. When Jake opened the door, there they were, two cops standing on his porch. He didn't look scared or mad, he just nodded like he'd been expecting them. "Hi," he said, nice and friendly. "What's up?" One of the officers, a tall guy with a mustache, scratched his head a little. He looked kind of embarrassed, like he didn't really want to be there. "Sir," he said, "we got a call about a noise complaint, something about wind chimes." His voice was soft, like he wasn't sure this was a big deal. Now Jake chuckled. It was a little laugh, warm and easy. "Yeah, those are mine," he said, pointing to the wind chimes hanging above the porch. They were still there, swaying in the breeze, making their soft, tinkling sound. Tinkle, tinkle. "They're not loud, though. Want to hear them?" The officers looked at each other, then nodded. "Sure," the second cop said. He was shorter, with a big smile. They both stepped back a little and listened. The wind blew gently and the chimes jingled, soft, sweet, like tiny bells playing a song. Tinkle, tinkle, tinkle. It wasn't loud at all. It was nice, like something you'd hear in a park or a garden. The tall officer tilted his head, listening close. The short one shrugged his shoulders. "That doesn't sound like a problem to me," the short cop said, scratching his chin. "It's pretty quiet, actually." The tall one nodded. "Yeah, I've heard louder stuff than this. Doesn't seem like a big deal." Across the street, Karen heard that, and oh boy, did she get mad. Her smirk disappeared fast, like someone had wiped it off her face with a rag. Her eyes got big and her mouth dropped open. "What?" she shouted to herself. She couldn't believe it. The cops were supposed to take her side. They were supposed to tell Jake to take those chimes down. But instead, they were acting like it was no big thing. That was not okay with Karen, not one bit. As she stomped off her porch, her flip-flops smacking the ground, slap, slap, slap. She marched across the street, her arms swinging, her face turning redder by the second. She didn't care that everyone was watching. She didn't care that the kids on their bikes were giggling now. She was furious. "This is ridiculous," she yelled as she got closer. "Arrest him, he's breaking the rules." The officers turned to look at her. Jake stayed where he was, leaning against his door, watching it all. Karen stopped right in front of the cops, pointing at Jake like he'd done something awful. "Those chimes are too loud," she said, her voice sharp and loud. "They're against the HOA rules. You need to make him stop. Arrest him right now." The tall officer sighed. He rubbed his forehead like he was tired of this already. "Ma'am," he said, trying to stay nice, "this isn't a crime. Those chimes aren't loud enough to bother anyone. We've got better things to do than this." The short cop nodded. "Yeah, we can't arrest someone over wind chimes. That's not how it works." Karen's face got even redder, if that was possible. She looked like a tomato about to pop. "What do you mean, not a crime?" she shouted. "It's an emergency. He's ruining the neighborhood. You have to do something." She waved her arms around, hopping up and down a little, like she was trying to make them see how serious this was. The officers didn't budge. They just looked at her, then at each other. "Sorry, ma'am," the tall one said. "We're done here." They turned and started walking back to their car, ready to leave. The lights on the police car were still flashing, but they didn't care about Karen's yelling. To them, this was a waste of time. They had real work to do, real problems to fix. Wind chimes, that wasn't one of them. But Karen wasn't done. Oh no, she wasn't going to let them walk away that easy. She whipped out her phone from her pocket, her fingers moving fast. "Fine," she snapped. "If you won't help, I'll call 911 again. This is an emergency and I'll make sure someone listens." She held the phone up to her ear and started packing, muttering to herself as she waited for someone to answer. Jake watched her from his porch. His smile faded just a little, not a lot, just enough to notice. He didn't say anything. He didn't yell or argue. He just stood there, his hands in his pockets, looking at Karen like he knew something she didn't. And he did. Something big was about to happen, something wild and surprising. It was closer than Karen thought, closer than anyone thought. Those wind chimes kept tinkling behind him, soft and steady, like they were part of a secret plan. The neighbors kept watching. The old lady with her dog shook her head and walked away. The kids on their bikes whispered to each other, giggling some more. "She's so mad," one of them said. "Yeah, but those chimes are cool," another one added. They didn't get why Karen was so upset. To them, it was funny, like a show they didn't want to miss. Karen didn't notice the kids. She didn't notice the neighbors peeking out their windows. She was too busy yelling into her phone. "Hello? Yes, 911, I need help. There's a man with loud wind chimes and the police won't do anything. It's an emergency." Her voice echoed down the street, loud and shrill. She thought she was winning again. She thought she'd get her way. But Jake, he wasn't worried, not really. He leaned against his door, his eyes on Karen, that little smile still there, just barely. He knew something she didn't. He'd known it all along. Those wind chimes weren't just decoration. They weren't just for fun. They meant something big. And Karen was about to find out what. She thought she was in charge, but she was wrong. She was walking right into a trap, and she didn't even see it. The tension was growing, like a balloon getting bigger and bigger. Karen was pushing, yelling, trying to win. Jake was waiting, quiet, holding his secret close. The cops were leaving, their car pulling away, the lights fading down the street. The wind blew again, and the chimes sang tinkle, 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 like they were teasing Karen, daring her to keep going. Can you guess what's coming? What do you think Jake knows that Karen does? Is it something funny, something scary, something totally wild? Don't blink, because the twist is right around the corner, and it's going to be a big one. Stick around, this is getting good. Karen was in the middle of her big yelling fit, packing back and forth on Jake's lawn. Her phone was pressed tight against her ear, and her voice was loud enough to wake up the whole neighborhood. "Yes, 911, she shouted. "I need help now. This guy won't listen, and the police didn't do anything." She was so mad, her face was bright red, and her flip-flops were slapping the ground with every step. She didn't see what was happening behind her. She didn't hear the low rumble of a new car pulling up, but everyone else did. Just then, a shiny black SUV rolled into view. It wasn't a police car like before. This one was different, sleek and fancy, with dark windows you couldn't see through. It stopped right in front of Jake's house, quiet and smooth, like a cat sneaking up on a mouse. The two officers who'd been walking back to their car froze in their tracks. Their eyes got big, and they turned around fast, staring at the SUV. Something big was happening, they could feel it. But Karen, she didn't notice a thing. She just kept yelling into her phone, too busy being mad to look. The SUV's doors popped open, and out stepped two men. They weren't wearing police uniforms like the other cops. Nope, these guys had on sharp black suits, the kind you see in movies about spies or secret agents. Their shoes were shiny, and their faces were serious. One of them reached into his pocket and pulled out a badge, a little gold thing that sparkled in the sun. He held it up high so everyone could see it. "Jake Miller?" he asked, his voice strong and clear. Now Jake was still standing on his porch, leaning against the door. He didn't jump or look surprised. He just nodded, cool as ever. "That's me," he said, like it was no big deal. His hands were in his pockets, and that little smile was back on his face. Karen heard that and stopped yelling for a second. She turned her head, still holding the phone, and saw the men in suits. Her eyes squinted, like she wasn't sure what was going on. Then the man with the badge spoke again, and everything changed. "Agent Miller," he said, "we've got a situation downtown. We need you back on duty now." The whole street went quiet. You could hear the wind blowing, making the chimes tinkle, 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 but that was it. No birds, no kids, no whispers. Everyone was too shocked to make a sound. Karen's jaw dropped open, like her mouth forgot how to close. Her phone slipped right out of her hand and fell to the grass with a soft thud. She didn't even try to pick it up. She just stood there, staring at Jake, her eyes as wide as dinner plates. That's right, Jake wasn't just some quiet guy who liked lemonade and wind chimes. He was an undercover cop, a real-life secret agent working on a big important case right there in Maple Grove. Nobody knew, not the neighbors, not the kids, not even Karen, the queen of complaints. He'd been hiding it the whole time, pretending to be a regular guy while he was really something amazing. And those wind chimes, they weren't just for fun, they were a signal, a secret message for his team. Every time they rang, it was like a little code telling his friends he was still there, still safe, still working. That's why he didn't care when Karen got mad. That's why he stayed so calm. Those chimes were part of his job, and he wasn't going to take them down for anyone, not even the bossy HOA lady. But here's the best part. Those two officers Karen called, the ones who showed up earlier, they already knew Jake. They were in on it. When they came to his house and acted like it was a normal noise complaint, they were just playing along. They knew he was an undercover cop and they didn't want to ruin his secret, so they pretended it was no big deal, shrugged, and left. It was all a trick to keep Karen from figuring it out too soon. Karen finally found her voice, but it came out all shaky. "You're a cop," she stammered, pointing at Jake like she couldn't believe her own eyes. Her face was a mess, red and sweaty, with her mouth still hanging open. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. Now Jake grinned bigger this time. "Yup," he said, simple and proud. He stepped forward and tapped the wind chimes with his finger. Tinkle, tinkle. They rang out loud and clear, like they were laughing at Karen. "And you just called 911 on me for this," he added, his eyes twinkling with fun. Karen didn't know what to say. She blinked fast, her hands flapping at her sides. But, she mumbled, trying to make sense of it. She'd been so sure she was right. She'd been so sure Jake was just a troublemaker she could boss around. But now she looked silly, really silly. The neighbors watching from their windows started to giggle. The kids on their bikes burst out laughing, pointing at her. Even the old lady with her dog smiled a little. The two men in suits didn't wait around. "Let's go, Agent Miller," the badge guy said, nodding toward the SUV. Jake gave Karen one last look, a little wave like he was saying goodbye, and then he walked down the steps. He didn't rush, he didn't brag, he just strolled over to the SUV, cool and confident, like he'd done this 100 times before. Karen stood there, frozen, watching him go. Her phone was still in the grass, buzzing with the 911 operator saying, "Hello, hello." But she didn't hear it. She was too busy trying to figure out what just happened. She called the cops on a cop, a secret cop, and not just any cop, but one who was way more important than she'd ever be. Her big plan to win had turned into a big flop, and everyone saw it. What do you think Karen's face looked like right then? Can you picture it? Red, sweaty, and totally shocked. Oh, it gets even better from here. Jake's secret was out, and Karen's big moment was ruined. The neighborhood wouldn't forget this anytime soon, and neither would she. Stick around, because the fun's not over yet. The two officers who'd come earlier couldn't stop laughing as they walked back to their police car. They tried to keep straight faces before, but now, they didn't even try. The tall one with the mustache chuckled loud, shaking his head. "Ma'am," he said to Karen, still giggling, "next time maybe talk to your neighbor before you dial us." The short cop nodded, wiping a tear from his eye because he was laughing so hard. Yeah, this was a wild one, he added. Then they climbed into their car, still snickering, and drove away. The flashing lights disappeared down the street, leaving Karen all alone. Karen's face turned red, redder than a ripe tomato. She opened her mouth to say something, anything to make herself look better. I didn't know, she stammered, her voice shaky. This isn't my fault, but no one cared. The neighbors watching from their windows didn't listen. The kids on their bikes didn't stop giggling. Even the old lady with her dog just kept walking, like Karen's words didn't matter anymore. She'd lost, and everyone could see it. Jake, meanwhile, was ready to go. He stepped off his porch and walked toward the shiny black SUV where the men in suits were waiting. But before he got in, he turned to Karen one last time. "Keep the chimes in mind next time you want to start trouble," he said, his voice calm but strong. Then he winked at her, a quick, playful wink that made her blink in surprise. He climbed into the SUV with his team, the door slammed shut, and the car sped off. Vroom. It zoomed down the road, fast and smooth, leaving a little cloud of dust behind. Karen just stood there all alone on Jake's lawn. Her phone was still in the grass, forgot. Her flip-flops looked silly now, not powerful. She didn't move, she didn't yell, she just stared at the spot where the SUV had been, her mouth hanging open a little. The neighbors started whispering louder now, pointing at her. "Did you see that?" one said. "She called the cops on a cop," another whispered back. The kids laughed even harder, rolling around on their bikes. Karen was humiliated, big time. By the next day, everyone in Maple Grove knew the story. It spread like wildfire from house to house, yard to yard. People talked about it over breakfast, laughed about it at lunch, and told it again at dinner. Karen's days as the big, bossy HOA leader were done. No one took her seriously anymore. When she walked outside with her clipboard, people just smiled and waved like she was a joke now. Her power was gone, puffed away like smoke. And Jake, oh, he was the hero of the neighborhood. Everyone loved him now. They called him quiet, cool, and tough, tougher than anyone had ever guessed. He'd been a secret cop all along, and that made him the coolest guy in Maple Grove. The kids wanted to be like him. The grown-ups admired him. Even the wind chimes seemed to ring a little prouder, tinkle, tinkle, happy to be part of his big win. How's that for a comeback? Karen thought she'd win, but Jake turned it all around. Justice was served, and it felt so good. Stick with me for one last thought, it's a good one. Okay, here's the big lesson from all this craziness. Sometimes the people you think are weak or easy to boss around are actually the strongest ones. They're the ones holding all the cards, like in a game where you don't even know they're winning until it's over. Karen found that out the hard way, didn't she? She thought she could yell and push Jake around, but he had a secret that flipped everything upside down. She was loud and bossy, but he was quiet and smart, and in the end, he came out on top. Jake showed us something cool. He stayed calm, even when Karen was freaking out. He didn't yell back or get mad. He just kept his head up like nothing could shake him, and that's what turned the tables. When you stay cool and don't let the bullies get to you, you can surprise everyone. Jake did that, and it worked big time. Karen never saw it coming, and that's why his win felt so awesome. So next time you see someone who's quiet or doesn't make a fuss, don't think they're weak. Don't judge them too fast. They might be hiding something amazing, just like Jake. They could be tougher or smarter than you think, ready to shock you when you least expect it. That's the fun part of life. You never know who's got a secret up their sleeve. Thanks for sticking with me through this wild story. Wasn't it a fun ride? What did you think of Jake's big secret? Drop a comment below and tell me. I'd love to hear. See you next time for another cool tale. Bye for now.